Britain and India have recently announced a new free trade deal. It is a free trade of fitness information. I'm Tom. I'm a strength and fitness coach in South Wales. My colleague is Knuckles, PhD in strength and conditioning. Welcome to the Un-Trainables podcast. Dr. Knuckles, how are you doing?
Fat Tom, how are you?
What are we talking about today, mate?
Your throat.
Oh, don't talk about my throat. I've been ill. I've been a bit ill. We missed a week of recording, but I'm back. I'm full health.
He's back and how? Shout out the NHS.
Yeah. Shout out the NHS. Because the human body is incredible in its recovery capacity and its resilience, isn't it, Dr. Knuckles?
Is that why we're shouting out the NHS?
Yeah. It's great at recovering when it's got antibiotics.
So, so what are we talking about today? And it's probably good to give the listeners an idea of why we moved this topic up the list of things we wanted to discuss.
Yeah, it was always on the list. We're going to talk about injury quite a lot today. That is the entire topic of the video. And the reason for that is not a particularly happy one. And actually, we've kind of had a bit of an argument, haven't we, over whether or not we should be talking about this, because something quite awful happened last week. You may or may not have seen it on social media. If you haven't seen what we're about to talk about, I recommend that you don't go and watch it, because it's. But a young girl, a powerlifter based in India, passed away last week whilst training in a gym, and it was totally awful. I'll let you talk about it a little bit, Knuckles. Do you want to just briefly, like, let's keep it super brief as well, because it's not a nice topic. Explain what happened to this girl, what was she doing, how did it happen, whose fault was it, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so it was this girl, 17. She was squatting what looked like a fairly heavy weight. The media reported as 270, but we don't know if that's true or not. And the fact of the
Kilos.
matter is 270 kilos, yeah. The fact of the matter is that the bar was set up too high on the rack. Instead of lowering the bar to a more suitable height, they stacked rubber mats for her to step onto and unrack the bar. She unracks the bar, the weight seems a little heavy for her. She's already like struggling to kind of walk it out, and she now has to step down off the rubber mats. As she steps down, her left ankle rolls, she loses her balance, collapses, and the bar rolls onto her neck, and she passes almost instantly.
Yeah, absolutely horrible. And obviously, like, we don't have much to go on. Like, we can identify all those things from the brief video. It's not like the highest quality video or anything like that. We can even point fingers based on the information that we do have. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's important to point out that all we have seen is one video, and we have a little bit of like hearsay context on your end from people you've spoken to. But yeah, it's the worst possible scenario. She seems to have been underprepared for the load, but also the kind of method of unracking that bar was horrific. And I don't know, I might be biased and I'm probably jumping the gun a little bit, but I would always say that it's the job of a coach to keep an athlete somewhat safe, and the spotters as well, and to do their jobs properly. And none of those things seems to have happened. But anyway, the reason we bring it up is because we had a risk of injury in the gym on our list of things to talk to you guys about. And obviously, the biggest risk has occurred, and it's horrific. But we kind of wanted to take the opportunity to remind people that it isn't actually dangerous, because it is, like, you know, or super awful stories like this that get really, really elevated in the media that I think give the gym a bit of a bad name. And then you get your parents and your grandparents saying, "Oh my goodness, please be careful in the gym," and things like that. Don't lift too heavy. So yeah, we're going to talk about risk of injury, Knuckles.
Yeah, I know you said, just really quickly, because I don't want to stay on it for too long. I'd rather get into what we need to discuss. But like Tom mentioned, that we don't know too much about her training history and the loads she's lifted before and things like that. But simple things that could have been done right were things like having a competent spotter, setting up the bar at the right height, things like that. It just screams recklessness and irresponsibility on the side of whoever's in charge. And yeah, it's things like this that gives strength training a bad name. But we will leave this incident at that for now. Um, just doesn't feel right, like going on and on about it. But what we'll start
No.
with is what are some of the real risks of resistance training, and then where does it stand compared to other activities, primarily like say playing sport.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to surprise people a little bit because when you start to look at the chances of injury, and you tend to look at these things, obviously it's massive groups of statistics all bundled together. We tend to look at it as, on average, how many injuries occur in a particular sport per 100 hours or 1,000 hours of participation. So when we start to look at that data, it becomes glaringly obvious that the gym is one of the safest places to be in terms of performing physical activity. Because when you look at certain sports, and I've pulled up just one piece of research which I can flash up on the screen at a later date, but like only to pull out one little statistic, there was one piece of research that this other review looked at which states that the overall injury rate per 100 participant hours in rugby is zero point 0.8. So even that's pretty low. So 100 participant hours, so that could be one individual playing rugby for 100 hours will get injured zero point 0.8 times. But for resistance training, it was 0.0035 times. So it's just to demonstrate the order of magnitude in which lifting weights is safer than most sports, and obviously rugby is a pretty violent one. But yeah, that's across the board. It's mirrored across the board. It's football, tennis, all of these sports. They are more dangerous.
Yeah, I think the gym is probably the most controlled environment that you can put yourself in. Like, I know there was one paper you'd mentioned earlier. Can you just tell the listeners about that, which listed, I think, was it the top 5 or 6 causes of injury in the gym?
So this one looked at hospital admissions from gyms. It was a certain hospital, and it was gyms in the surrounding area. Any hospital admissions from this gym, they kind of categorized them to find out what were the most common causes. Why are people getting injured in these facilities? And it kind of lists. It goes into like what they were doing at the time, but the causes are the most interesting thing. The most common cause of injury in gym is overexertion, which we'll touch upon a little bit later. But then beyond that, it's things like number 2, crushed, and this is 16% of all injuries in the gym, crushed by falling or dropped weights. Number 3, tripped in the facility. Number 4, landed awkwardly. 5, contact with equipment or a wall. So this would literally be like walking into something. Trips and falls whilst using cardio equipment. So you've all seen the videos, people tripping on the treadmills and then pretending to do push-ups when they land. Trips and falls whilst using static fitness equipment, caught in the equipment, literally getting stuck in stuff. I hope that never happens to any of you. Equipment malfunctions and then contact with literally other people in the gym. That'll be scraps up in Merthyr Tydfil. But none of these things are. Oh, he was doing deadlifts and he did them slightly wrong.
Um,
Is it? It's not the stuff I think that people would expect to see on a list like that.
Tom, you've been training, I think in the last episode or in episode 2, you said, how long now? 13 years?
Yeah, something like
What are the
that.
major injuries you've picked up in 13 years?
The only major thing I've had is the knee pain. We'll call it uncategorized knee pain because I never got it scanned or looked at properly, which was number 1 on that list. It was overexertion over a long period of time. I suppose you'd categorize it in there, but I wouldn't go to hospital for that sort of thing. Yeah, it was overtraining and under recovering,
Yeah,
doing knee based movements. And we spoke about it in a different episode, didn't we? It was
volume. Yeah.
absolutely tons of squatting.
Yeah, because I think so. I've been training 15 years now. I've had 2 ACL reconstructions, one meniscus repair, one meniscectomy, a minor tear of my pectoral, But none of these injuries were in the gym. They were all playing sport.
Actually, last week's episode or the week
Oh, it's true.
before,
I
you
did leave out the elbow.
you tried to do a single
Yeah,
arm
and that's a
chin-up.
perfect example
Over,
of mismanagement of load.
overexertion,
Yeah, yeah.
overexertion.
So these are, I mean, so six injuries, and one was in the gym. And the one that I did pick up in the gym is just absolute, outright, clear irresponsibility and recklessness on my part.
Yeah, a man who has studied
Yeah.
strength and conditioning for many years,
I feel like it would have been less
just doing silly
embarrassing if
stuff.
I fell off my bike and hurt myself.
Yeah,
Right. So we've touched upon how like people are a little worried about the risk of being in a gym or the risk of lifting heavy, and this almost paves way for a lot of fear mongering to prey on this idea that people have that the gym might be unsafe, and it leads to fads like low impact training or lifting light loads to preserve joint health. Can you almost explain to the listeners one of the most fascinating things about the human body is its resilience and how we adapt to the stress that is placed upon us?
yeah. It's you're right. There's all sorts of fads around there at the moment, but all people do is basically removing load out of the equation because of the fear. But the fact of the matter is, the single best thing about the human body is it adapts to external stimulus. Like it's probably the main reason we're such a success, apart from growing a relatively big brain compared to other animals. We're incredibly adaptable, like, and whether that's to our environment or a dumbbell, a bigger dumbbell that we picked up this week, we're incredibly adaptable, which means we're resilient. We can expose ourselves to really difficult things, and if we keep doing that, our body just gets better at dealing with it. And that's the end of the story. Like, any training system that is trying to remove stress is deeply flawed, because stress is the thing that we're it's the only tool we've got in the gym. Stress is the thing that we're applying, and it's going to keep coming back to this, but what matters is the dosage of that stress. Yes, there is an amount of it that's going to be too much, but going back to the resilience of the human body, it's quite a lot. We can hit the body pretty hard. It doesn't need to be. We don't need to pussyfoot around our training and do weird, light loaded, twirly cable exercises to remain injury free. In fact, the more stress we can expose it to and recover from, the better prepared that we'll be to deal with other things like sport.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that I think two of the things that receive, I don't want to say the worst rep, but are usually highlighted as being dangerous are one, using heavy training loads, and two, impact based training like plyometrics. But if you actually look at the research, heavy strength training and plyometric training elicit positive adaptations in bone mineral density. They elicit positive adaptations in the tendons, in the ligaments, in the cartilage. If we're talking about the back, the lower back musculature adapt to loading, the discs adapt to loading, your vertebrae adapt to loading. So it all comes down to how you manage that stress. So heavy strength training is good for you. You just need to be sensible with the prescription, that is the management of volume load. Allow yourself enough time to adapt to the load, to recover from the loading, and then progress it. Don't be impatient, don't be aggressive. Take your time.
Like, two really important principles that you've just touched on, I like actually have names. Wolf's law, which is bone density and strength is governed by the loads that they are or are not exposed to, which means they can either be exposed to loads and get stronger, or not be exposed to loads and get weaker. And then Davis's law is exactly the same. It's almost word for word, except it's soft tissue length and strength is governed by the forces that they do or don't get exposed to. So yeah, you can either get stronger overall because you're exposing yourself to stress, or you can completely remove that stress out of your life and just get soft and weak. That might sound harsh, but it's the absolute truth. You either use this stuff or you will absolutely lose it, especially when you take into account things like aging.
So I was just going to touch upon that, which usually with the older population, they get fed this idea that lift light loads, don't do any impact based work. But if you look at the amount of literature in aging populations, so 60 plus, perimenopausal and postmenopausal women, heavy strength training. And when we say heavy strength training, remember we mentioned this in previous episodes as well, it's relatively heavy. So it's heavy for you. It's
Yeah.
not an absolute load, it's relatively heavy. Heavy strength training and plyometric training are absolutely safe in older populations, and they're good for bone density. They're good. I'm never going to use this term again, but I will say functionality in an older age, you need to be training heavy, you need to be doing plyometrics.
Jumping and lifting.
Yeah.
Again, use it or lose it. Yeah, some of my favorite people to work with, and some of the like the most obvious progress, I suppose, are in my older clients. And older, I mean like 55 plus. They're they're so fun to work with. Obviously, they've lived lives that are great to talk to. You can steal some wisdom from them, but also they, for most of their life, have been told of the dangers of this sort of thing, and then they start to realize like how much they can get out of it. And I think once they get over the initial God, I wish I'd been doing this for longer, and they sort of start to think more about, well, I've started now. Let's see what we can achieve. It's awesome.
Have you had discussions with them then around like where they when they've been told that maybe they should avoid something, there's a high risk of injury associated with it? Is there anything in particular that they're told that is dangerous?
No, it's lifting in general. I think. Do you know what? I don't know who's telling them this stuff, but I think it's just like it's. I don't think it's one person or two people in their lives who are just like it's dangerous, it's dangerous, it's dangerous. I think it's more like a just a generally held opinion that you need to be careful doing this stuff. Like it's everywhere, isn't it? Like workplace um, health and safety training. There's always a segment. Doesn't matter where you work. It could be a you could be a legal advisor. You're still going to do. I think it's once a year. You're going to do a little module on how to lift a file up off the ground, and it's like, oh, like it just puts it in your head that you have to be careful when you're moving. Or apparently moving's okay. You can tie your shoelace, that's fine. But if you drop a pen and you have to lift the pen up off the ground, now you have to do it in a very specific way. And I just think that plants a damaging seed in people's minds. It's not a helpful seed that will lead to growth. It actually starts to stop people wanting to do the things that will help them get stronger and fitter and healthier, which is not ideal.
It's funny that you mention the workplace stuff also, because a client of mine who I'd mentioned in episode 1, who had the injury, the femoral neck. So she just finished a weightlifting competition and she took gold. But at her workplace, when she started lifting, colleagues and stuff, so she's a partner in a law firm, and fellow partners and colleagues started telling her, like, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, why are you lifting
Yeah.
such heavy weights? And so she is 40, but she's currently around 48.5 kilos. She squats, she hit an easy single at 85. And the reason why I'm saying this is, so I coach her in her apartment gym, and the gym has men, women, everyone coming in. And she's probably the person who lifts the most in that gym.
Yeah, that's just wild, isn't it?
And there's men who've come up to her and said, why are you lifting that heavy? You shouldn't be lifting that heavy.
It's one of the things I love most, actually. Like, I'm almost glad that there's this narrative in the background that people need to be careful. There's my thumbs up. That's awesome. That's a piece of software, man. Yeah, I love that I get to give people permission to go and be an absolute animal in the gym. It's fantastic because I work with quite a lot of injured or people who've come from injury clients, and they've always been told, don't do this, don't do that. And then you give them permission to that actually, we talk about all the things in a slightly shorter format that we've talked about today, like the ability of the human body to recover and adapt to things and just how resilient it is and what it can achieve if you train the right way, I suppose. Yeah, they just lift some really heavy objects and there's nothing that feels that good. I suppose
Absolutely.
there are other things that feel better, but it's awesome. Yeah, and I've had clients who've been told by surgeons and doctors that they will never ever run again, only to kind of give them permission to try, and then you monitor their recovery, you monitor everything about how they're feeling, gradually build it up, which will probably bring us on to a further point in a bit. And now one of them's an Ironman. What do you? What was the surgeon talking about? Shouldn't shit on them too much. They do some incredible work, but I think it's fun. My point is, it's fun to give people permission to do this stuff
Yeah,
when you know that they can.
I think like a few of the older clients I've got, when I first started working with them, I think the first thing I would have told them was, we're going to be lifting heavy, we're going to be doing stuff that requires effort, requires you to work hard, and every now and then you might get a little bit hurt. You might pick up a niggle, you might have something that hurts more than a 5 on a pain scale of 1 to 10, but these things happen. It's
Yeah,
part and parcel of it. And the moment they accept
yeah,
that, the things that they can do or that they're now opening to do, it just blows my mind. It's one thing that was holding
yeah.
them back the whole time.
I've probably said this to you before, and I feel like I've said it to you before, and you were like, "Shut up." But I say it to clients quite a lot, and it's one of those it's kind of like a cue, and I don't know if it lands with that many people, but I just love saying it. I say, like, sometimes warriors pick up
Shut
wounds,
up.
and my point is, yeah, literally, as cheesy as, and I don't think I'm that cheesy of a guy, but I just, for me, it works. Like, I want my clients to think they're warriors. They are. Like, they're doing stuff that the majority of the population don't do and never will do. So when you're doing badass stuff, like, guess what? When you're training hard enough, you're going to get these little niggles. But in the same breath, Gary, who's sat on the sofa for 8 hours every evening, he's also going to get some aches and pains. It's just going to be that he picks them up when he goes and gets a cup of tea that weighs more than 250 grams. You're going to do it when you're ripping 150 off the ground, 150 kilos off the ground, not grams. So yeah, they're part of the process. I think people want this mythical, completely linear progress into infinity, like every day, because lots of, I think I said a couple of episodes ago, people want this 1% better thing, and they expect that 1% to be added every day or every week and consistently added, but it ain't like that. People talk about weight loss quite a lot. It's not linear, it jumps around. It's just, you've got to look at the bigger picture and the average trend. It's the same thing with, I was going to say performance enhancement. I suppose it is, not artificial performance enhancement. It's the same thing. Like, you're gonna be jumping around a lot. You're gonna have setbacks. You're gonna get ill, like I did last week. Like, and it feels rubbish. It really does feel rubbish. But whilst accepting your feelings of, oh, I'm so sad, woe is me. It's awful to be injured. It's awful to be ill. Zoom out a little bit. Get back into your training. You're going to get back onto the same upward trajectory. All that matters is, on average, you're getting a bit better.
Yeah, fair.
I went off on one then.
That's fine. I think people need to hear that.
It's fine. Yeah, yeah. Where were we? Where am I?
So I think we started off with this question of me asking you if there was one thing in particular that your clients were told was dangerous or to avoid.
Oh yeah,
And what I was kind of leading to was this idea that you cannot pinpoint one single thing as being the cause of an injury. Um,
yeah. Oh right, that's what you were getting
that's
at.
what I was getting at. I was
Yeah,
trying to no, injuries are multifactorial. You can't isolate one specific variable or factor and say this caused your injury. You didn't put the clips
yeah.
on,
Well,
and that's why your ACL is now ruptured.
exactly. When you unracked the barbell onto your back, you were half an inch off center, so your QL on your left side has been blown to smithereens. No, it's we hear this phrase a lot. I don't know if other people hear this phrase a lot, but obviously my Instagram is just jam packed with fitness gurus. Um, yeah, injuries are multifactorial, and it just means, and that goes for pain as well. So pain and injury is multifactorial. It means they got more than one cause, but it's really hard to like visualize and understand that sort of thing because when you do pick up pain or an injury from something, there's always something that air quotes caused it. Like it might be bending down to pick up a pen in the office, like I said earlier, or reaching up to the highest cabinet in your house to get a mug, and or opening your car door. I hear quite a lot, and then something will go, air quotes go. So it feels like that was the cause, and it's very difficult to convince someone that that wasn't the cause. Like, how could it possibly be? Like if you pulled a muscle out of someone's body and put it in some kind of machine that would stretch it, you'd very quickly find that these structures are incredibly tough. Uh, mugs of mugs from cabinets can't put a dent in it. You know. So yeah, it's not. I think another kind of metaphor that I sometimes use is the old straw that broke the camel's back thing. I think that's quite a nice visual image because it wasn't the last straw. Like, yes, that's the thing that kind of coincided with the camel breaking its leg, but actually, you have to take into account all the other straws as well. So, yeah, maybe I've spoken a lot. I'll chuck this over to you. When you speak to clients about this sort of thing, what are the types of things you think they should be considering? What are all the straws? What does each straw represent?
Yeah, so that's the bit. Like when you said injuries are multifactorial, if you take injuries in general, so for example, you mentioned the injury rates in sport are higher I mean, injury rates are higher in sport compared to strength training or resistance training in the gym. But that's also because the number of unpredictable variables while playing sport are much higher.
Yeah,
In the gym, they're fairly less or comparatively less. So my thing with clients is always you can't prevent it, but we can control the controllables. So there are variables that you can control. Um, and they're very simple, they're very cheesy, they're things which you hear all the time. It's not magic, it's not witchcraft. It's simple things that getting good sleep, um, despite what social media might tell you about being on the grind and getting up at 3 a.m. and journaling by 3:30 and then finishing your workout by 3:45. Get a good night's sleep, 7 to 9 hours. Eat well. For those who are trying to lose weight, you might be on a calorie deficit. Keep that calorie deficit reasonable. Don't cut out certain foods. Like you can still eat a balanced, healthy diet. Make sure you're hitting all those macronutrients. And then the most important thing is prioritizing recovery, so managing stress levels. And when we talk about managing stress levels, it's not just the physical stress that comes from training. It's also trying to manage the stresses in your life. And I know that's easily said than done. And for me to talk about it probably isn't fair because I would say I have comparatively less stresses, but Tom would be a good one to.
you've got an easy life.
Yeah, I mean, Tom's got a family. He's just, I mean,
Oh, they're stressful.
yeah, and like Lyra's still fairly young. She has nights when she doesn't sleep, she falls ill, all of that, and then managing the full time job. So there are a lot of stresses, but the little things that you can do to try and manage that stress and just give yourself time to recover, that those are the things that you can control. Those are things that will go a long way in almost reducing the probability of you picking up an injury just from training in general.
Yeah. I quite often talk about a hypothetical bucket. You might have seen me like throw up a graphic every now and again on Instagram. So this bucket has a hole in for some reason. And the things that come out of the hole, I would visualize or try to get someone to visualize as like outputs. So this is your training. So it's I guess how hard you're working. But it's also things like that empty your cup, I suppose, like stress at work and social interactions and things like that. And then the stuff that's coming in to the bucket via a hose pipe or something would be the stuff that kind of top you up again. So your diet, your nutrition, the food you eat, the amount of sleep and the quality of that sleep that you're getting. And then other stuff like I think people underestimate the power of genuine rest, like actual downtime, just sitting still. and not doing a whole lot and trying to just be calm. I really think like people go on about things like active recovery. No, that's coming out of the bucket. That's still exercise. I know it's very low intensity and it's not going to have a huge impact. Not recovering during that time, I wouldn't say, or I don't think you should think of it that way. It's still an output that go into the bucket. Genuine rest. Go and sit down. Go and be like Gary on the sofa for a bit. It's fine to do that, and it's actually really beneficial to your recovery. And if something's beneficial to your recovery and you get that bucket to fill up a bit quicker, that's going to be more beneficial to your performance output as well. You'll be able to do more and then recover from more.
Yeah, I think it was Dr. Mike Israel when he was talking about recovery strategies and this whole idea of active recovery and things like that. What he said, like really like hit the nail on the head. He said recovery is the one thing where people ask you, what more can I be doing to recover better? When the question should be, what little should I do? Like, what's the
Yeah,
like absolute minimal amount of work I need to do to recover? Not what
stop
more.
doing stuff.
Exactly.
Stop adding stuff, please.
Like I've got clients now, and
Yeah,
then who've been training for a while, and then I'll try and make sure that they get at least in a week, one full day of absolutely no training at all. I might tell them go
yeah,
for a walk for 10, 15 minutes just to move a little, which is absolutely fine because I know a lot of them, it gets in their head. They feel a little off in the head if they don't move.
yeah. We should clarify. Like, I had to go active rest
Yeah.
then, and that's purely in terms of input output. It fills your cup in other ways, being outside and going for a walk. So I am by no means saying don't do that stuff. I'm just saying don't think of it as like an addition to your physical recovery from training, because that's not quite how it works. It probably does have like some positive effects on it, but just don't think of it like that. Just go for a walk and enjoy the sunshine. God damn it.
Yeah, I think the main thing which Tom is stressing on there is it's very low intensity. Like there's, I would say put it maybe at like an RPE 1, RPE 2. You're just literally going for a walk. It's like if you're walking down to the shops, that's all it is. Go out, get some fresh air. If you're in Wales, catch the 2 minutes of sun if you can. But that's what it is. You don't need to be doing anything intense or any additional activity to recover.
Mm,
And like so
yeah.
we talked about variables that I tell my clients to try and control. And then the other aspect I tell them to leave to us, the coaches, which is the training load and the training volume, the training frequency, and the stress that comes from training. Leave that to us. That's what we do as coaches. And we can tell how much you can manage, what's sufficient for you to get the benefits, and we make sure you don't do anything extra.
It sounds like what you're saying is that people need a very experienced, very knowledgeable coach in the background telling them exactly how much to work. And obviously, that's the best way to do it, in our completely unbiased opinion. If someone what didn't have a coach, couldn't afford one, whatever, or maybe they've got a massive ego and they think they can do it all themselves. Is there a good way you could explain to know how much is enough? How to know if you're doing too much? Are there certain principles you should be adhering to?
Ooh, that's a difficult one. I'll try and explain it. Well, not explain. I'll try and give the listener the idea that I gave a client of mine recently, which I said it's not how much you do, but it's how well you do what you do. So even if you're literally going in and doing 2 sets on 3 exercises, but you're working hard, you're using a relatively high load, you're staying within those 2 to 3 reps of failure. 2 sets, 3 to 4 exercises, you're absolutely fine. You can get that done in 30 minutes, push it maybe to 40, but that's more than enough. So it's not about how much you do, but it's about how well and how well you do those things and how hard you push yourself with that amount of work.
I suppose probably some good advice would be the amount of training that you cover in a week shouldn't change a huge amount. Like obviously people have like varying schedules and stuff like that coming in and out of their lives. So there will be an element of it, but try to keep it quite consistent each week. And don't change a huge amount. Obviously, you can swap exercises around. It's all good. We like variability, but yeah, try and keep it quite similar, and then just see how you feel and see how you're recovering, because you'll know if you should know if you're under recovering slash overtraining. There will be certain signs and symptoms that won't feel too nice. Yeah, and if you feel like hot shit, then reduce the amount that you're doing and see what happens. Like there has to be a trial and error element, and that's no different for us as coaches either. We don't know, but we try stuff, and then we're looking at the results. That's probably the difference between a coach and an amateur. Is we're happy to try stuff. We know what to look for in terms of a result, and then we know what to do off the back of that to make things better. And then over a long period of time, you can just narrow in on, I don't want to say the word perfect, but you can narrow in on perfection for an individual, an amount of training, an intensity of training that just works,
Yeah, but
and you'll get there.
that's the important thing to touch upon is that, like when Tom says that we trial it, we know what we need to be seeing in terms of what works. It's we're looking at the evidence as a guideline, but we also acknowledge the fact that there are individual differences, there are individual responses, there's individual variability. So you use that guide and then you see how that individual responds, and then you make changes specific to that individual based on the response you've observed. So you have to know what stimulus you're trying to deliver, but also what to look for in terms of adaptations, and then
Mm.
vary it or make changes specific to the individual.
Yeah. I think we're in real danger here of straying away from talking about injuries. So let's get back to it. I know you wanted to make a final point. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on when you see things about injury prevention? What are your thoughts?
Oh, well, let me stop you there, Knuckles. It fills me with a white hot rage if that's what happens in my mind. No, I don't know. Like, I'm probably a bit calmer now than I used to be. I would absolutely prefer the term injury reduction, because I think we can do that. We can train in a way that prepares us for certain stresses. I don't think that you can prevent injuries. I don't think it can be done. I think again, there's individual variability. Like occasionally you'll see an athlete who just does not get injured throughout their whole career, and they're just completely invincible, and good for them. But I really don't think that the biggest factor is the way they've trained. Often, I think they're that way in spite of their training. I think it's probably just genetic. They're just made of tougher stuff, and probably
I
lucky
was just going to
as well.
say,
There's probably a big
yeah,
element of luck as
like
well.
sounds like sometimes luck is just a huge part of it.
Yeah,
If there's
it's
little things,
madness.
because
If we could bottle that up, we would.
yeah, because I mean, take for example, when we talk about rugby, the pitch you're playing on, if someone's in a full sprint and they happen to run on one part of the pitch where the surface is a little off or the grass is a little loose, the boot gets caught, or when they're cutting and the boot gets caught and then the knee ends up going in the wrong direction, that's just bad luck. That is pure bad
Yeah.
luck.
Obviously, like training can have an impact, and I'll give you an example that I only know of because I saw a physiotherapist talking about this a long time ago, and it stuck with me because he was talking about one of my favorite rugby players I've ever watched, which is Quade Cooper, Australian, incredible dude, great little goose step on him. He has had quite a few hamstring issues. I'm 90% sure it was hamstring, and he was rehabbing this hamstring issue, and he was training to return to play. And this physiotherapist that I follow, I forget who it was, had been kind of observing his training because it was all getting posted to social media, and I think he followed his coaches, and he was doing all his training and his running stuff on sand because it was quite popular at the time. Like training on sand is difficult. People like to do hill sprints up sand dunes, and it feels hard, so it must have good carryover into sport. But it turns out, first game back, pop goes his hamstring, and it's just because the playing surface was different. So, like, it certainly has an impact. If he had trained on his playing surface, then perhaps he would have been better prepared to play sport on his playing surface. It's kind of obvious, isn't it? But yeah, we don't think injuries can be prevented, but they can certainly be. We can reduce the incidence
Yeah,
if we train
you
well.
can build the resilience of the body, and You can almost prepare the athletes to cope with the demands of their sport, and that's all you can really do.
Yeah.
But considering, okay, so if injuries are now not preventable, what's your advice to someone when it comes to a point where they have picked up an injury? I know you never recommend this, but so I'd ask you what your thoughts are when people are told to rest, which is complete rest, and what is your advice when someone picks up an injury?
This might surprise you a little bit. I think complete rest is fine, and I think when people do pick up injuries, especially bad ones, there's always a period at the start where you are just distraught, and it feels like the end of the world, and it is just a horrible feeling. I'm going to lose everything I've worked for, and I think it's okay to kind of like fall into that and listen to your doctor and have complete rest. Especially, some injuries are very very serious and they do require it. But on the other hand, I think you should be getting back into movement as soon as humanly possible. I think you need to dig yourself out of that emotional crater and start moving. And it can be anything. That's the thing about injuries is they're rarely full body. We've it's unless you've been in some kind of horrific car crash, you haven't broken all four of your limbs. You should be moving. Like there's plenty of research to demonstrate that keeping moving in some capacity will improve your like ability to return back to normal. It'll improve the speed of your recovery, but it'll improve things like your return to sport if you are an athlete, your success once you do so. It's incredibly important to keep moving, and it doesn't matter what that movement is. It doesn't matter how much you have to scale it back. You have to work around the hand that you're given. Like what is injured? How badly is it injured? But you should be doing everything that you can to keep training in some capacity.
I'm not a big fan of the complete rest bit. One reason is, of course, what you said that, I mean, you've not injured your entire body, so there is still stuff that you can do. Um, but when we were studying injury psychology, the bit that you touched upon where you're almost emotionally distraught after picking up the injury, that is the primary reason why I never advise complete rest. Because complete rest, you're probably going to stay at home, so that feeling of community or that social element that you had getting to the gym, that's now been removed. We talk about the same thing in a sports setting. So when we were studying injury psychology, it was more in a sport based setting where our advice to coaches would always be still bring the athlete in to training sessions, team talks, when you're discussing strategies for games, because when they're going through the rehab process, they're going through it on their own. Don't isolate them, make them feel included, make them feel like they're still a part of the team, make them so. If you take that same idea into people who train recreationally, I still want them going to the gym and being a part of the environment and not feel like they're being left out or isolated. So the idea why I don't like the idea why I don't like. So the reason why I don't like this idea of complete rest is more the psychological aspect of feeling left out, like you're on your own now. And of course, physiologically, there are things that you can do. Like, I really like the principle that Mueller and Malouf touch upon, which is calm the tissue down, build the tissue up, and then improve work capacity. So,
Mm.
why back into the gym and do that stuff just so you're surrounded by familiar faces? And if you're in a good gym community, I guarantee you'll have their support through the entire rehab process. And that goes a long way.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree. Yeah, to be clear, I would never advise someone to take full rest. My personal take on it would be that it's important to accept the way they're feeling, and sometimes you just need that short period, like a little lull,
Yeah.
and then you can make a comeback. But the comeback should be ASAP, back to not normality, but as close to it as you can get. The worst thing about getting injured and being in pain is that it starts to remove stuff from your life. And your life almost gets smaller around the injury, and it just makes the injury feel more significant. So the closer you can get to a full normal life, the smaller part of your life that injury will take up, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that, the simpleness of the principle you mentioned there. Calm this issue down, which is just, let it chill out a bit when you're training. Don't absolutely annihilate it. Yeah, let it recover, because the key thing it needs is time. It doesn't need ice baths. It doesn't need bandages. The 95% of it is put time between the incident of the injury and where you are now. As much time as you can. Every injury has an amount of time that it'll take to heal from. You just got to get there, and then yeah, build it up and improve its work capacity. That's it. Yeah,
Yeah, and just get back in the gym.
love
There's
it.
plenty you can do. And I hate using anecdotal incidents, but I think after my second ACL reconstruction, it might have been the meniscus. Like, Tom literally picked me up the next morning when I was discharged, and we went into the gym. Like,
Yeah,
that's what we did, just to get back in that
yeah.
environment, to just be around familiar faces and an environment that,
Do you hit some arms?
yeah, arms and bench.
Yeah, hit some arms.
Yeah,
There's nothing wrong with that stuff.
and you're just back in an
No,
environment where you like being.
no plyometrics.
Nah,
Not for a while.
I let the tissue calm down.
You're fully healed. You're fully healed now, but you still jump.
I still don't do plyometrics. To be fair, I've been
No,
using.
you try. I've seen so you don't get off the ground.
I think this is where we end this episode.
Yeah.
Any
Uh,
final takeaways, Tom?
no, I think we've covered everything injury wise. I did just want to say that we kind of got lighthearted on that whole thing. We obviously started on a really, really heavy note, but our thoughts are with that poor girl's family. You know, it's not going to be all right, but hope it's as all right as it can be. We won't name her. We won't show the video. We hope people don't mind that we used it to kind of segue into some talk about pain and injury, but it felt like the right time. But yeah, thank you for listening, guys. Good chat,
Good
Nichols.
chat.